Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, Anita Finley.
So we are, of course, all into politics right now, and I have someone who really knows about politics from way, way, way back. He wasn't living then, but he's a researcher, and he loves politics when it comes to presidents. So Richard Lederer, who's calling in now from San Diego, California, is going to talk about fascinating facts from our presidents. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Well, welcome, and we'll start with a little bit of humor. I'm delighted, especially, Anita, that you're having me on during this year of electile dysfunction. And
electile dysfunction. I love
but
that.
There's more coming. And without using any dirty four-letter word on your show, which, of course, you would never do, can you tell me what politicians and diapers have in common? No dirty word now.
Okay. Well, when I take my dog out, my dog poops. Is that a dirty word?
Well, that's a little better, but here we go. Here's what politicians and diapers have in common.
Okay.
They both need frequent changing, and for the same reason.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, okay.
Both.
Oh, okay. I got it then. Yeah, no, that was fair. Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah, nothing. And you mentioned the word politics. Do you know the etymology of the word politics?
No, I don't.
Origin.
I don't.
I'm going to tell you and your bazillion listeners.
Okay.
In etymology, and, I do that as part of what I do, and your readers certainly know that because they see my stuff often. It's like that. It's called, you divide and conquer. It's hard by the yard, but it's cinched by the inch. So when you get a 2 or 3 syllable word, you divide and conquer. So what I mean is, you're so magnanimous to have me as a regular guest on the show. Magna is large, and anima is spirit. So you are large of spirit. Your listeners are perspicacious. Peri is through, and these are Latin Greek words, and stick is like speck, and it means to feed something into the heart of it. In the word politics, you hear poly, and you know that it's many, as in polytheism and that kind of thing, polygamy, marriage to many spouses. So politics, the word poly is many, and ticks are blood-sucking parasites. So that's how you get the word.
Oh, my.
Joking, of course. I'm joking, of course.
Seems very true this year.
Yeah. So let's talk about presidents, and what would you like to know?
Well, I'd like to really know about our very first president, of course, who is George Washington.
Yes.
And he sounds like he was a pretty nice guy.
A good guy, also one of our tallest presidents. And here's the story with George Washington. His greatest contradiction, Anita, was that he did not become king, although he could have, and that was the model. When he was elected president, or became president in 1789, other rulers of the world included the King of France, the Tsarina of Russia, the Emperor of China, and the Shogun of Japan. And of course, today there are no such rulers, although some people might say there is a Tsar of Russia, at least not officially. No King of France, no Shogun, no Emperor of China, and so on. But the office of president endures and prevails. And part of the reason for that is that Washington did not want to be called Your Majesty. And that was the model, of course, the British model. And he did not want to be bowed to and all of that stuff. And Martha was not to be called the Queen. And he stepped aside after 2 terms, and actually a little bit less, because he came in April, so the first term was a little bit foreshortened. And he left us that legacy. Another interesting thing is, of course, he could not have been a president before. He became one because he was the first, or vice president, or member of cabinet, because there wasn't one, or Congress, He could have been a governor, but he wasn't. He was a general, and we've had some who have been just generals, Grant and Eisenhower also. The interesting thing is, should Donald Trump become president, he will be our first who is none of the above. President, obviously what we running, vice president, senator or congressman, governor, member of a cabinet, or a general. He would be the first. Hillary, of course, Clinton, his apparently presumptive rival, has, of course, been a senator, and she, of course, has served in the cabinet as Secretary of State. So that would be something new if Mr. Trump becomes president.
I wasn't aware that every president was something. I was trying to think back on Truman. What was Truman? Was he a representative?
He was he was a congressman at any rate from Missouri, and of course he was a vice president before he became president.
Right, but okay.
And he ended up serving almost the whole of that fourth term as FDR, and then won his own term. And, you know, the famous picture of his holding up the Chicago Tribune, Dewey wins, probably the greatest upset in presidential history, because it wasn't just the Chicago Tribune poll. It was every poll said Dewey is going to win. How could Dewey lose? First of all, governor of New York and his running mate, his vice president, potential candidate, was Earl Warren, the governor of California. What a combination. And, Roosevelt had been in for 4 terms, or 3 and, some. My God, how is this guy going to get elected? Nobody could be Roosevelt, but he did win.
And I know I was just going to ask you a question. So how did he win?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How did he win?
Well, he won because he really perfected the whistle stop. And he went out, people began to see Dewey with that toothpick mustache as a little bit distant from the masses. And Truman went out and really, the train stops here and there, the happy warrior type. And that is how it happened, that he just pulled that amazing upset. So that made 5 terms in a row of Democrats, and that is the longest that we have had. We've had 4 in a row of Republicans, but that was a 20 years of Democratic administration.
You do know so much. This is so fascinating. I love this. Okay, so we've talked about George Washington, and what did he do when he left?
I think he retired to his estate in Virginia. All of our early presidents were from Virginia and Massachusetts. And he died just at the turn of that century, so he was around really not for very long afterwards. He was born in 1732, and he died at the age of 67. And rather interestingly, given boomer times and, your service to the, shall I say, chronologically inbound,
You're bad.
Anita, our first 10 presidents lived to an average age of 77.6. I mean, that's essentially the lifespan of folks like us now. And these were people born in the 18th century, starting in 1732 with Washington. It helps that one of the 10, so 10%, lived to 90 years and 8 months, and that was John Adams. Pre-penicillin, all of this medical knowledge and, the knowledge about exercising and diet. And only 2 of them died under 70, and that was Washington at 67 and William Henry Harrison at 78. But the others all lived to 70 and beyond, James Madison, 85. So really quite something. Our presidents have been quite long-lived. And since Hoover, all of our presidents who have died of natural causes, meaning not, assassinated or whatever, they have lived to over 80. since Herbert Hoover. The one exception, Lyndon Johnson, where the males had just finally seen to succumb to heart attacks in their early 60s. But we just have this amazing longevity among presidents. And if I may follow this a little bit, here's some interesting facts. John Adams, a man born in 1735, vice president to Washington, and then Adams became our second president. He lived to 90 years and 8 months, and that record for length of life, Anita, lasted 175 years. A man born in 1735. It was then exceeded by Ronald Reagan, who became our longest-lived president and who died at 93 and 4 months. And then that was exceeded within 2 years by Gerald R. Ford, who lived to 93 and 5.5 months. So Adams became third, and then in a wink, he's fifth, because our fourth longest-lived president is George H.W. Bush, who's just turning 92. And our fourth is Jimmy Carter. Even though Carter was president earlier, he's actually a few months younger. They were both born in 1924. So in a wink, Adams, who is number one, goes to number 5. And that's because we're living longer. You know, we've got Roger Federer and Serena Williams playing great tennis in their mid-30s.
Right.
And a 39 starting quarterback and winning the Super Bowl. And this is an emblem of our lives, and that is Adams is really within a wink going from first to fifth in terms of length of life.
It is really mysterious. It seems that maybe being present, even with all the stress, helps them to live long.
Yes, I think so. You know, it's a little bit like, it's been shown that Academy Award winners live an average of about 3 years older than the ones whom they defeat, you know, the other candidates, but who don't get the Oscar. And I think there is something about the drive that it takes the person, him or herself, that can do that. I think it's just something in the person. And, of course, now presidents, you know, live awfully good lives afterwards. Truman just retired to his place in Missouri, and, you know, that was it. Now they're out and about and all of that. But at any rate, we're living longer, and we see it in our presidents.
Right. I just read something, but was it in your column that about the youngest president? And I don't think it was Kennedy. Was it Kennedy who was the youngest president?
My pleasure to tell you. We'll look at the other end. And it's, but I'll just mention in this race, Hillary Clinton is 68, and Bernie Sanders is 74. Michael Bloomberg, who decided not to enter, but he is 74. I mean, look at these ages.
Right.
And guess what? On June 14th, and I'm not sure if that's future or past with this interview, Donald Trump turned 70, meaning that should Trump become president, Mr. Trump will enter office 6 months older than Ronald Reagan when Reagan came in at 69 years, 11 months, and 2 weeks. So just short of 70, Trump will be 70 and more than 6 months. And you'd never guess it, you know, with the man's energy. So going to the youngest, this is a great bar bet, and that is you ask somebody who was our youngest president, and trust me, 90% will say John F. Kennedy. Good-looking guy, great head of hair, gorgeous wife, real fashion plate, 2 very young children while he was in office, Caroline and John. Actually, Patrick, a second son, was in the oven for the last stillborn. Surely it must be John Kennedy, who was 43 and 7 months entering office in 61. But believe it or not, he's our second youngest, and our youngest is Theodore Roosevelt, who came in, who came in at 42 and 10 months in the wake of the assassination of William McKinley.
Uh-huh.
So the answer is that Kennedy is our youngest elected president. But our youngest president in office was Theodore, who was 9 months younger, and who also became our youngest ex-president at 50. And incidentally, in terms of young presidents, I'll give you a quick rundown. I gave you the 5 oldest. Theodore Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, our third youngest, William Jefferson Clinton, and he was 46 and 5 months when elected. Our fourth, you would never guess because of all the cigars he smoked, which ultimately afflicted him with throat cancer, and that is Ulysses S. Grant. He was 39 when the Civil War began.
Really?
And he was 46 and 11. And our fifth youngest is Barack Obama, who came in at 47 and 1 month. But the interesting thing is the average age of a president entering office is 54. And but now we're moving toward older candidates, at least for this election.
Amazing. I love these facts. These are spectacular. It really puts things into perspective. I really like that you do this. Thank you so much.
And Anita, let me tell you why I do it. We live in a democracy, and the key to a democracy is knowing your history. We live in an age, and these are, believe me, authentic surveys. 1/4 of Americans believe that Columbus set sail after 1750. I'm not making this up. 1/3 cannot identify the century in which the Revolutionary War was fought, and only 3/4 cannot name the nation from which we gained our independence. Only 7%, and listeners, just think, are you one of them, or are you more informed than that? Can you name the century of the Revolutionary War? Can you name the nation from which we gained our independence? Do you know when Columbus sailed? Did blankety blank, you know this one, Anita, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Of course, 1492.
Right, in 1492 and so on.
Right.
Only 7% can name the first 4 presidents in order. I suspect most people can do Washington and Adams, but can they follow it up with Jefferson and Madison?
No.
Only 21% can name the 4 faces, the 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore in any order. Because the order is actually rather tricky. 52% can name at least 2 members of the Simpsons family, the cartoon on Fox. They can name generally at least Homer and Marge or Bart or whatever. And history and civics are our worst subjects. So I've written my history books in order to combat this. And that's why. And actually, I'm actually heading east, and I'm going to be doing a tour about the presidents in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and so on. Those states, the Middle Atlantic states. I will go anywhere for this stuff.
I'm sure you. It's so perfect. And I was thinking about the wives of these men. Dolly Madison was pretty important, wasn't she? She really took up the gauntlet, I think. I mean, I don't know about Abraham Lincoln's wife or George Washington's wife.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell
Help me.
About some first ladies. Dolly Payne Todd Madison, first of all, married to our 4th president, James Madison. By the way, he was 5'4" and 100 pounds, perhaps our only president who weighed more than his IQ. And a very bright guy, the father of the Constitution. And he was married to Dolly Madison, who not only gave us famous ice cream, but she socially ruled Washington for decades. She was very colorful, wore exotic scarves, turbans, very colorful dresses, and just was a real kind of superglue for Washington. And a little known fact is that in 1814, when the Brits were torching Washington, as you know, they essentially burned it to the ground. And that was shortly before the Battle of Baltimore, where we got the Star-Spangled Banner written by 35-year-old attorney named Francis Scott Key. But at any rate, she rescued gallantly and under some danger the Gilbert Stuart portrait of George Washington, and that is the only surviving artifact from the original White House, although it wasn't quite that.
Now that's an extra little thing no one knows.
Oh my God, we have, I strongly recommend to your listeners, if you get HBO all the way, and it's Bryan Cranston playing Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Oh, I saw that. I saw that. That was a fabulous movie.
And that was Melissa Leo as Lady Bird, who was absolutely terrific.
Right.
And Whitford from The West Wing is Hubert Humphrey, and then there was a McNamara.
Right.
It was amazingly done. And but there is Lady Bird Johnson, who, along with Theodore Roosevelt, are two greatest presidential, or in this case, First Lady, conservationists. She had a lot to do with the planting of flowers on,
right.
median strips on highways.
Right.
And as you see, was a major factor in her husband's thinking. And, of course, the most famous is Edith Bowling Wilson. When Woodrow had a stroke, there are debates as to how much influence she wielded, and she said, I only did my husband's bidding, but she was essentially the president. And obviously, Hillary Clinton was a very strong voice in Bill Clinton's administration.
Yes.
And very interestingly now, just in, within the blink of a memory, we've had our first two first ladies who are law school graduates, and that is Hillary from Yale and, of course, Michelle Obama from Harvard.
Right.
Now, and when Hillary Clinton was elected a senator from New York, that is the first lady to hold public office subsequent to being first lady, and obviously very strong first ladies. And just an interesting fact, Michelle Obama is tied for the tallest first lady we've ever had. And you may notice when you see her next to her husband, Barack, she's pretty close, not quite as tall. He's about 6'1.5" and she is 5'11". And the woman she is tied with for tallest first lady is Eleanor Roosevelt. Really? Yeah, Eleanor was tall, and of course she looked taller, towering over her husband in a wheelchair. But at any rate, first ladies have had enormous influence. And again, in my books, I, of course, cover first ladies as well as presidents.
So I have a question. If Hillary becomes president, and Bill, of course, will be, I don't know if they're going to call him, how will you refer? Will you refer to President Clinton? President Clinton? How are they going to refer?
I know he's already been president, so I would tend to say president, but I would say that his role, at this juncture, if Hillary Clinton becomes president, I would say his role, I would call it first gentleman, lady and gentleman, not first husband, because the woman isn't the first wife, but I would say, first gentleman, I think would be the way to do it. A little bit about Hillary Clinton in terms of statistics and so on. Obviously, we have had women running for president earlier, but not for Republican or Democratic Party, for the two major parties. So we have the first woman to secure the nomination, which has just happened, for sure. And as we are talking, and here's the thing about women in the presidency. Number one, there are more of you. Women live anywhere from 5 to 7 years longer than men. Second, women vote in greater percentages, which, by the way, may be one reason why they live longer, because they're more involved. I do a number of retirement homes. I go and speak on subjects like this, and I just see, and I'm a guy, so I don't like to see this, that women are more involved in the book clubs and ideas. They show up more for my performances. So women vote in larger numbers, and so that, says something about Hillary's chances. And that's interesting for this reason. Since World War II and Truman's administration, because I'm a pattern finder, Anita, I see patterns.
Oh.
Only once has a major party kept the Oval Office for more than 2 terms. So what I'm saying is, starting with Truman, who served, well, in a sense for 2, because he really did most of the 4th term of Roosevelt, neither party has held the White House for more than 2 terms, with a single exception of Reagan-Bush. That's the only time that it's gone 3 terms, and that is Ronald Reagan served 2 terms, 1980 to 1988, and George H.W. That's the only exception. Well, the Democrats obviously have been in for 2 terms, and notice before that were 2 Republicans, and that would be, George W. and George W., and before that 2 for the Democrats with Clinton and Clinton. So that would say that we're due for a Republican president, because the Democrats are. However, the metric has changed with a woman running. And, if I may say, because I was an international debating coach, a very articulate woman. So, at any rate, now it remains to be seen. I know the polls are tightening. I'm sure you've read that. And we're in for a very interesting race. And you may know that my family has a bit of a connection with Trump, because my daughter, Annie Duke, the poker player, was a finalist 8 years ago on Celebrity Apprentice with Donald Trump.
Oh, my heavens. Well, at that point, I'm going to take a deep breath and tell you we've run out of time. Because I never liked The Apprentice, actually. So it's funny. Okay, well, I'm sure your daughter was wonderful when she was on there. But, Richard, thank you so much. And we will have you on. We have to continue to have you on until this election is over, I think.
My pleasure. There's not much more to talk about presidentially. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. Okay, well, your column will be in this upcoming issue in June. You'll get a copy of it, and it's all about the presidents. And thanks again